Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. I guess this is my first video on Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford. Fight goes down on the 13th of September, takes place in Las Vegas, will be televised on Netflix, non-pay-per-view. And in this fight, Terence Crawford is jumping up 2 weight classes in an attempt to become undisputed super middleweight champion, those belts being held by Canelo. Now, for me, I'm not really sure how to feel about this fight. Naturally, I'm very skeptical of many Canelo fights, especially these days. For me, his super middleweight run, more or less, has been just uninspiring, boring. I question how many of these opponents came to win. Make of that what you will. You guys know my opinion on Canelo Alvarez. I'm not convinced that many of his recent fights have been on the up and up. And ultimately, I found his 168 run boring. I found his career post-Golovkin too boring, quite frankly. Couple of exceptions. Billy Joe Saunders' fight was alright. Aside from the quit job, the Munguia fight was alright, and that's really it. Even the loss to Dimitri Bivol looked like a sparring session to me. So, yeah, for me, the last few years of Canelo's career have been super boring. Terence Crawford, inactive recently. He fought once in 2024 where he beat Israel Madrimov, becoming the WBO super welterweight champion. And in that fight, I felt Crawford won. I felt people were giving Madrimov a little too much credit. But Crawford didn't have that fight his own way. And Madrimov did take rounds off of him. It was a competitive fight. I can see the case for Madrimov winning 4, maybe 5 rounds, but no more than that. And, Madrimov went on to prove that, he wasn't the best in the division like people were claiming he was prior to that fight. In fact, after the Crawford fight, I would say Virgil Ortiz beat Madrimov far more decisively. Was that fight a showing of Terence Crawford's age? Was it a sign that at that weight class his power wasn't carrying? There's questions to ask there. And yeah, he's fought once a year for the last, 4 or 5 years, Crawford? 6 years, maybe? He fought once in 2020, once in 2021, once in 2022, once in 2023, once in 2024. 37 years old, going up 2 weight classes to 168. How's he going to carry that weight? How's he going to move with that weight? How's his speed going to be with that weight? And, there's questions there around Crawford. I know people are watching the face-offs and saying Crawford's bigger. He's certainly longer in terms of reach, but, to me, Canelo still looks thicker set. Obviously, the guy clearly has a much greater bone density than Terence Crawford. He's still more natural to the weight than, obviously, Terence Crawford is, and Crawford hasn't felt 168 power. Whether you class Canelo as a big puncher, he hits hard enough. There's a lot of thud behind those punches, a lot of force, and I'm pretty convinced, despite even me thinking Canelo is an overrated puncher, particularly at 168, I very much doubt Crawford's fought somebody who can punch with that type of force, with that type of strength. How's his body going to stand up to that? We don't know. There's a lot of question marks about Crawford coming into this fight at 37, nearly 38 years old, plus the inactivity, plus the weight jump. But there's also a lot of questions about Canelo. I think Canelo's been looking pretty mediocre for a long time now, I would say. Very slow feet. His feet have always been slow, but it looks like they're super slow now. He doesn't punch with the same output. He doesn't put his shots together in combination like he used to, kind of. Doesn't jab enough, in my opinion. Even defensively recently, he's just been able to get away with a high, tight guard and not much else. There's no head movement. There's no real slipping. And again, that makes me question the legitimacy of his previous fights at 168, I have to be honest. But yeah, for me, there's a lot of question marks about both guys. I'll be real. There's a lot of question marks about both guys. I question also the legitimacy of the fight. I do when it comes to Canelo, have to be honest. That's always a big put off for me when I think about Canelo upcoming fights. But this fight is a little different. Maybe we might get a curveball in the sense of, this is arguably Riyadh season's biggest fight they've put on. I'd say it is, actually. It's on Netflix. It's not pay-per-view. It's going to be broadcast to millions and millions and millions of people worldwide. It's the biggest show they've put on. And Turkey is still kind of seething, I would say, in regards to the New York card and the last Canelo card. The New York card in Times Square was absolutely horrible. Fighters running and prancing around. We saw the same in the Canelo Skull fight. And obviously after those fights, we heard Turki Al-Sheikh come out and condemn runners in boxing, things of that nature. I'm wondering whether this fight might actually be a curveball considering the attention that's going to be on it. I think if people get a hint that this fight could be fixed or not on the up and up, considering the audience that will watch this fight, that would be a terrible look for Turki Al-Sheikh and Riyadh season, especially considering the last two cards as well, right? It would be a terrible look. Also, you think that both guys don't really have much juice in the game. Both guys are on the downward slides of their careers, I would say, particularly Canelo. But also Terence Crawford, he's 37, he can't go on for much longer, and quite frankly, he's never been a star. He had a semi-big fight with Errol Spence Jr., and he's in this mega fight with Canelo mainly because of Canelo. After this fight, where does he go, really? Realistically, where does he go? Does it make sense for them to rig the deck in his favour? Not sure. Maybe it does because there could be a rematch. Maybe there's a rematch clause. I don't know. But he doesn't have much left in the game, I would say. Same goes for Canelo, Canelo's got one more fight on his Riyadh deal after this bout. Canelo's got a habit of not sticking with one promoter at this point in time in his career. He's kind of jumping around. He's been with PBC. He's been with DAZN and Matchroom. Now he's with Turki Al-Sheikh for a 3-fight deal. One of those fights has already happened. Is there sufficient motivation to stack the deck in Canelo's favour? Or Crawford's favour, considering, again, both guys are at the end of their careers. I just got a strange feeling that this fight may be allowed to play out naturally, and what we see may be real. Because again, does Turkey want any more bad publicity? Does he want any more bad PR in terms of the quality of these fights? Again, especially after those two previous cards. It's a massive advertisement for Riyadh, for Saudi Arabia, for his project, for Turkey's project, which is ultimately, a Saudi government project. Will they try and rig that fight in front of millions of people? If people get a sniff that it's fake, it's going to be a bad look, right? I'm just kind of freeballing here. I'm not saying I'm right, I'm wrong. I just got a weird feeling about this one. I've got a weird feeling this fight might be legit. Well, as legit as boxing fights are these days. Anyway, share your thoughts below. I'm just kind of musing about this fight. Maybe I'm trying to get myself hyped up for it, maybe. Because I'm not really excited for it right now. But yeah, share your thoughts below. Let me know what you think. Am I off base or do you see it similar? Share your thoughts below. Beanie Guy Delboy. Peace.